started. We've got some new faces in the audience, so we can do real quick introductions of our committee members, starting with Councilman Spikes.
My name is Councilman Derek Spicer.
Mark Schwartz, Ward 5.
Jack Deacon, First Ward.
Mike Lesser, Ward 2.
And I'm Scott Spencer, Ward 3. All right. Item 2, we have approval of the August 10th, 2023 committee minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those?
Move to approve minutes.
Second.
Can you tell me who seconded that, please? Thank you.
We have a roll call on that. Sorry.
On the minutes?
Yeah. Is that formally?
That's probably not necessary.
Okay, not necessary.
Not for
All those approval?
Controls that.
Aye. Nay? Same sign. Okay, we move to item 3, citizens' opportunity to address the committee on public works issues. Do we have anybody signed up for that?
We have this couple right here that came this morning.
Please step right up to the podium and just state your name and
Sure.
address if you like.
My name is Dan Sneeders. My wife Charlotte Sneeders is with me today. We live at 920 Sherwood Drive, which is on the west end. We're in Mr. Spicer's ward. We've been dealing with an issue on our street since last August, or thereabouts, dealing with some infrastructure changes that are in the process of taking place, I guess is probably the best way to say it. Last August or so, we started getting literature on our street that Socket was going to be putting underground cable on our street, which is fine. A lot of us welcome that. Obviously, competition is always good when you're dealing with something like IT support, internet provider, that kind of thing. So anyway, almost overnight, we were surprised one day that we've got all kinds of paint on our sidewalks, telling us, and flags in our yard where things are going to happen, and things looked like they were moving just fine. So things are going as scheduled, I suppose. Well, again, very in short order, we had holes dug in our yards, and all of a sudden we had influx of large equipment on our street, which is all part of an infrastructure change. And again, I understand that. Along with that, a lot of this damage was pretty significant. And we're talking to some of the guys on the street, you know, the guy with the shovel in his hand, and he's giving us answers like, oh, yeah, another crew is going to come back and they're going to fix all this stuff and they're going to resod your yard and stuff. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's great. We're looking forward to it. So these things happen, and all of a sudden this, what looked like a really fast out of the gate job, turns into a long, protracted effort. And again, we don't know what's going on. We as people who live on the street don't know exactly what's going on, but it's apparent things aren't going as quickly as planned. And so it's dragging on, and we're wondering when these repairs are going to take place, when this stuff is going to get in, and it just seems to be taking an awful lot longer than expected. Well, then we're hearing rumors that, well, there's different vendors involved, different subcontractors involved. The previous subcontractor ran into problems with lots of stone on that hillside. It's not surprising. There's lots of stone in Jefferson City. Every ridge line's got it, and I can see where infrastructure changes like underground cabling would be a problem. Well, anyway, overnight. One morning, we start seeing a crew out there, and they're starting to fill in the holes. Now, mind you, they're not doing the tailored job that most of us homeowners prided ourselves in having on our street. They're just filling in a hole, and there's lots of rock, debris, all kinds of crap above ground still. So we're a long way from a return to the before state kind of situation. There's an awful lot of orange piping still sticking up through the ground. Again, we're told that this stuff is going to eventually be repaired. Well, one day everybody's gone, okay? And pretty soon winter sets in. Nobody's repairing anything anymore. What's going on? What's happening? Well, the subcontractor's been fired. New changes are taking place. Again, we as residents on the street have no clue as to what's happening. None. So this went all through the winter. In April, I'm a retired guy. I like a nice yard. So I just took the initiative along with one of my other neighbors. We went out and we got the sod and we repaired our own yards. Buried the orange piping. Not sure if I should have, but I did. And returned my yard to as near of a 4-state as possible. Again, we're not getting contacted by anybody. About a month and a half, 2 months after that, we start seeing repairs being done. Some of those neighbors who waited, their yards are being repaired, and that's fine. Well, I wrote a letter to the vendor and said, hey, look, buddy, I would like to have my grass back too. And so I said, I don't mind the fact that I took the initiative to do it myself, but I'd like to be reimbursed for it. So he nicely did that. He reimbursed me for the grass. I also asked at the same time, I said, how about the curb and gutter damage I suffered? How about the apron for my driveway? And the chunks out of my curb, that sort of thing. Well, you'll be hearing from my operations guy about that. All right, so I waited several weeks. I texted, finally after about a week, 10 days, I texted myself, no answer. I finally called the guy and said, hey, what's going on? He said, well, you'll be hearing from my guy. Well, I never did hear from him. So another week or so went by, and so I'm getting pretty impatient about this time because this thing's dragging on, and everybody knows the story about the check being in the mail. It apparently wasn't in the mail. It's not getting done. So anyway, I called early one morning and I said, well, let me call you back a little later on in the day. Well, I don't get a call from him. I get a call from a gentleman from the city who's responsible for right-of-way. And the fellow's name is Eric Dooley. Eric tells me that, listen, this is not going to happen. We're not going to, apparently what took place is the city has gotten involved and basically perhaps part of the condition for the permits that were issued to do that work has decided to get tough with them, with the Ridenour folks, and has basically held that situation hostage. Hey, look, we and I may have misstated that. I think it's pretty accurate though. That we're going to hold you to the permits. You guys are going to have to come back and do a certain amount of repairs. The long and the short of that was that several houses up the street from me had full curbs, in one case, full curbs and gutters replaced. In many situations, huge sections of curb and gutter replaced. Sodded, all that sort of stuff. So we're anticipating it's
the end of driveways repaired. Sorry for interjecting, but some of them the builder that lives across the street from us got his skirts, the bottom of his driveway replaced, his skirts, his gutters across the front of his whole property. The people next to him, which didn't even ask that we know, also got 2 large sections, probably 8-foot, 10-foot sections, totally replaced, sidewalks, gutters, skirts, and sodded. They all got them sodded. And the people next to them also 2 large sections. One house, 10 houses up from ours, didn't even ask. She was going to be a socket customer. They came and replaced the end of her driveway. She didn't even ask for it. Here we had, I think it was Eric Dooley, who was 10 feet away from us, and we said, we've got chunks out of our curb. Can you come and look? No, we're stopping at the end of the builder's curb. We're stopping. We're across the street from that. And he wouldn't walk the distance to come and look. So Dan ends up writing a 2-page letter on this and takes pictures and delivers it to Britt Smith, to, I don't know if it was Ron Fitzwater, Derek Spencer,
Yeah.
and Bridnar and
Well, if you don't mind, let
At
me
least-
pick up from there.
Okay.
That response, I got a response pretty quick. Literally, the response almost beat me home from the mailbox because it was one of those responses that says, no, we decided we're not going to make these repairs. And basically, the repairs are going to stop at the corner across the street from my house. And I'm at a loss as to why. I really don't understand.
Ironically, the people next door to us, to our right, got their section of sidewalk replaced. But nobody, they took a picture, it looked like from across the street of our damage. Now, you can't see anything from that picture, but that's what was done, and we thought, they must think we're idiots. You know?
It looks like a picture of my lawn, which is pretty nice, by the way, and not a picture of the damage. Now, in some of the correspondence I sent to the city, there are close-ups of those cracks. I mean, it's clearly, there are clear cracks in those curb and gutter. So, and my concern is, long-term concern, is that that curb and gutter is gonna, its life expectancy has been shortened considerably. Someday I'm gonna have to deal with it. I'm gonna have to deal with it a lot earlier than I expected, and it's gonna cost me money to do that.
And it's not like we asked for a total repair of this, replacement of the curb and gutters. We thought maybe they could cut those sections out and replace it. But nobody came to talk to us. We couldn't get anybody to return a call, or any of our attempts with letters were ignored except for Mr. Derek Spicer. He was the only one that called us twice. The only one.
Well, and I'm sort of
And
the
we've got
I'm sort of the
Mr.
situation
Morash that
where
lives down the street, and Mr. Ron Fitzwater that lives around the corner.
it's academic. It's one of those deals where I'm at the stage where when I deal with the city now, I'm waiting for the response of, well, what part of no didn't you understand? Okay, and I've been there before from my previous life experience. Sometimes there's nothing you can do. But I think we've been very reasonable with the city. We've been trying to approach the city, but we can't get anybody to knock on our door and talk face to face about what the real damages are. I think that's sad in a city this size when you can't deal face to face with issues like this. And I would advise you that if it's not me, it's the next guy. People are just people. You have to be approachable. And when you reduce yourself to dealing by emails or phone messages or what have you, you're not conducting the kind of business that we expect in a city like this. And I just think that's sad. We're sort of a medium-sized city with a small town atmosphere. That's why we moved back here after being away for 40 plus years. I don't expect that in my city. So some of our letters and some of our concerns and what have you are documented with the city Public Works Department now. What I'm asking this chamber to do is re-energize that a bit. Let's have some dialogue. Let's walk my curb and gutter. Let's see where, and it's not that image of the yard, my front yard, it's the image of those cracks and what have you. They exist. I didn't make them up, I didn't make them myself. So, I don't know.
In their letter, they implied that they don't think our contractor did it, implying we must have taken a sledgehammer to our curbs and our skirts to do that kind of damage in our driveway.
Okay. But you have any questions of me at all?
Can you give us a brief timeline of again, this started in August or?
Well, the actual work started in August. Again,
This year or?
no.
Last year, right?
Last. We're now approaching 13 months.
And we had just really, MediaCom came through and we're on a corner, so they
That's the
damaged
previous
the
piece of damage
sod
we had.
in the properties, and it took 2 attorneys to get resolution on that. And they worked for months, probably 7 months or more.
There must be something unique about, I don't know a lot about underground cabling, but there must be something unique about corner lots because there's a lot of stuff crossing right on the corner typically because you have to have a lot of infrastructure work right there. It's not like it's all in your front pattern.
Right, and our parked in front of our driveway and pulled his machine off his wagon and across our driveway. So
Okay,
that's probably where the chip came out of our driveway.
but that's kind of it. And unless you have any questions, me, I'll let it there.
Any questions from? I know we have addressed and had issues with contractors doing utility work all over the city. And I know our law department has really looked into, kind of
What,
increasing the enforcement there. And unfortunately, this issue has really gone on too long. I'd like to get our city staff to be able to respond while you're there. Matt, is there any?
Yeah, certainly we sympathize with their issue, and just for his, and Brett, I believe, did send a note back to you that he was wanting to come out and meet with you, just, set it up.
didn't happen?
Well, I've seen it, so maybe it got misplaced or didn't make it to
You
your.
mean Mr. Smith?
Yeah.
He did not meet with me. He did not
He,
recall me.
he requested a time that he could come meet with you, him and Russ, our street superintendent, and, we'd be glad to do that. Because I asked him about it actually just before I got your most recent letter. I said, have you ever heard from the Schneiders down there? And he goes, no, I never heard back from them.
He delivered a letter to him, a 2-page letter to his office.
Mr. Senior, I responded to your email to me. I'm sorry if it went into spam, but I did respond and ask if there was a good time for me to come speak with you.
So we'd be glad to do that.
You responded by email?
Yes.
No.
You sent an email to me in response to the letter that I sent to you, and I responded to that email the same day that I received it, stating I'd be happy to come out and talk with you.
Bottom line, we'd be glad to meet with you.
I'd be happy to, and I'll be happy to check my spam folder too.
And of course, as you well know, we're kind of refereeing these issues with Socket and the homeowners, and it's not the easiest thing to do. The damage next door, they actually had humped the curbs up and caused quite a bit of damage. So, and certainly, we believe you that but it's hard to get the company to say, well, that could have been caused by anybody, that little crack. It could have been just a settlement crack. It could have been a little chunk, snow plow, whatever. And so anyway, that's why I'd like to have Russ and Britt, our street superintendent, come out and that's Eric's boss, Russ, directly.
It
And
was
he'd be
our
glad to do it.
understanding that the city was suing Socket for those damages.
No.
That's what,
We had shut the permits down completely to get their attention, but again, it's a bit of a referee job on our part, so.
And at the risk of dragging this out, Rittenhour seemed like he was willing to do this, but he wasn't going to do it if he wasn't being forced to. Okay?
I'm not sure. I mean,
a little bit of a conflict, but he seemed like a nice enough guy. He's interested in getting his reputation back because obviously he suffered some loss of reputation on that street. And on behalf of Socket.
Yes.
So,
Can you leave your phone number so we won't have the conflict with email
who do
anymore?
I leave it with?
Leave it with me.
we got it right here, I think.
Okay.
I don't have the,
Oh, we don't have the number. We probably have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just go ahead and write the best one.
All right. I look forward to talking to you because that's the way I'm used to doing business.
yeah.
I can get out there and look at it.
All right. I'll take you at your word.
And then we would like to hear, a report back from you from email that how this is being resolved.
How often do you have these public works meetings?
We have them once a month.
I'll be happy to be here next month. Okay.
And
And I said this before in this body, but state law has really hamstrung cities' ability to address these issues. Back in 2007, 2008, cities used to be able to completely dictate how this work gets done in our neighborhoods. In 2007, 2008, the state took that power away from the cities and they put it over to the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission does nothing about it. Our tools to address people like Socket and Rittenhour that may have messed up while putting in their infrastructure are severely limited. We are using the tools that we have, but we do not have all the tools that we used to have. And so that's really hard for people like you here, because it makes sense that the city should be able to address what's going on in the city. But I am telling you, the tools that the state has left us are severely limited. And our cancellation of their permits, that's about the zenith of what we can do there. We cannot force people to go out and do this work. It's really, really hard to do. And so we are completely sympathetic, but But we just don't have the arrows in our quiver that we used to because of the General Assembly and what they've done in the last 15 years.
But, I mean, that's a pretty powerful tool. A permit is, I mean, you're cut off from doing business without a permit.
Now, how could you get 5 other people on our street taken care of, but you could totally eliminate it, our home? I mean, you replace gutters and skirts and driveway bottoms and sodded. And
We didn't
get
replace, we didn't do
no
any of that. That's,
consideration whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think that is what Mr. Moore would like to make sure there's clarification on, is that the city did not do any of those repairs or replacements. And that did fall back onto the contractor or the utility company to make that discretion. We understand and we do sympathize with your situation, and that's why I think a first initial step is having staff come out there and lay eyes on the conditions.
That would be great, and I welcome that. Okay, and I appreciate the council taking that on.
Well,
Thank you.
That's the least we can do.
All right, thank you.
So, thank you for your time this morning.
You bet, thank you.
Any other questions? And you have the contact information.
Yes, I got
Thank you very much. Any other citizens here that didn't have a chance to sign up, need to talk with any issues concerning public works? Okay. Move on to new business. Item A, sales tax H projects prioritization. Mr. Bainey.
Yes, thank you. So at the last or a council meeting a couple of sessions ago, the decision was made by the council not to move forward with what at that time was being referred to as the second phase of the Monroe Street project. And so we just wanted to circle back then and try to understand what other projects we should perhaps be looking at since that money has been freed up. So kind of a brief background. In March, the Public Works and Planning Committee looked at the projects that were that had been kind of outlined in the sales tax and did a little bit of reallocation and basically had realigned some of those projects in funding, as you see there in the memo. So the High Street Viaduct was recommended at $200,000, Stadium of Satin Wood $1.5 million, Monroe Street 3.5, Economic Development 1.8, and Wildwood Drive at $3 million. And so as we look at those projects now, the economic development portion, we have $800,000 of that that's put towards the CART, the railroad spur out in Algoa. The other $1 million of that is really not really assigned. And then with the cancellation of the second phase of the Monroe Street project, there's $2.7 million there that is now unassigned. And so we were interested if the committee wanted to specify a different project to use those funds for. And so certainly as we look at projects, we can look at them as individual projects or sort of as an overall, we want to accomplish this goal. And so that's kind of listed there in the memo too. Are we most interested in level of service or economic development or vitality or safety or other items? And so I've included in the packet as well some project lists that are included or represent themselves in our comprehensive plan, as well as our metropolitan transportation plan. And so those are in the packets and they're also there on the screen. They're really too small to read probably. The clicker, oh, there it is. So here's the metropolitan plan, again, listing out several different projects, and we're working on some of them. These tier 1 projects, the first one there, for instance, is the highway improvements on the bridge, across the bridge, and over on highway going towards 63. So that that is being done. And then, of course, we've talked, quite a bit in Campo, and I think in this body too, a little bit about the tri-level and the expressway. So that's the item number 2 on that list. And then again, the tri-level kind of fits into that next category. So there's quite a few of these projects that are on these lists that are actually being actively worked on. So again, this is just kind of a source for potential projects if we would choose to use them. And then I've included, and again, you can't really see, but these are some excerpts from our active transportation plan, another planning project or planning document that talks about potential infrastructure improvements. So with that, I'll leave that to the committee. And essentially, we're looking for the committee to let us know if there's anything particular that they would like us to be looking at, or how they would like to see those funds allocated?
And Mr. Bing, I think some of us on this committee had some sidebar conversations about trying to get a cost estimate of what Madison Street would be to tie in from what the state had already done from basically in front of Capital Region to enter the on-ramp to 54. So basically working from that point back north on Madison Street. I think that's a major thoroughfare in our community, and I know there's some areas of deterioration there, but I want to say
That is listed on, in this document. I believe it's the top one there on the right. I think I can't quite read it. And so in that plan, they had talked about.
what page is that in our packet information?
Yes, it's also in your packet. And so it does talk about making some improvements. What's referenced there is basically adding a center turn lane and removing the stop sign at Madison and Atchison Street.
Page 30.
And so that project is in there, and it was also mentioned in Madison Street, as Monroe was mentioned in the South Side plan, and much of the comment was the same. Again, Madison Street is relatively wide already, parking generally on both sides. What was mentioned in the South Side plan was basically improvements to the pedestrian accommodations on that street. But certainly as we look at it, the stop sign that exists on Atchison, as nearly as we can tell, that stop sign is there because of the desire to slow traffic as it comes off the highway and down the hill before it reaches downtown. So stop signs typically aren't what you would want to use as a traffic calming measure. And so if we look at Madison Street, there's probably some other things that we would want to do to try to slow that traffic down as we came off of the highway and sort of entered into the Munich-Berg area.
I guess the question would be, the overlaid and things like that would be a minor improvement really. But if you want us to go back and kind of figure out more and comport with these various plans and try to bring them together, there's probably some sidewalk issues, there's probably some traffic calming. I know the hospital has been concerned about where their driveway is in relation on this corridor, speeding coming off the highway, so there probably could be something done there as well. And have a kind of a bigger project there through that corridor down to where it's concrete, I guess.
Right, just before it reaches Duncan Street.
It turns to concrete, and so we could certainly figure that out, and overlay would be pretty straightforward. But I think it seems like you're wanting more than that, and that's what these plans say. Is that true? Or I guess I'm trying to get some feedback before we figure it out.
Not necessarily from my perspective, more.
I'd just say that interchange has got a lot of issues, I think, and worth doing some planning and creating a better structure there to handle the traffic with the hospital. And I also wanted to say with the Monroe Street, I'd certainly recommend while we're in that area near Whitney Expressway, that we take care of those sidewalks going from Tanner Way to Ashley Street, past these around. Those are some of the worst sidewalks in the city. Right there, and there are houses right on those sidewalks. They're used all the time. While we're in that area, I really think gotta do work there. We need to do something about those sidewalks.
And have you talked to your board? I mean, that is a cost sharing for the property owner and the city. That's just not the city's responsibility to cover the cost.
I know we're gonna talk about sidewalks next. That's part of this meeting, but.
Any other comments regarding to, I know our, I'm sorry. Okay.
Has there ever been something looked at about the entrance into the city off 54 on Madison. Has there ever been a study or look for a better egress and ingress, beautification, something saying, welcome?
Not necessarily beautification. The highway department has just recently had a consultant complete a traffic study of that whole interchange with the Jefferson Stadium and the highway, Madison Street. And so they had several different ideas that came out of that study. Probably one of the ones that would have changed that area the most was the actual elimination of the exit ramp from the highway onto Madison Street in its current position. If they were to have done that or proposed that, how they would have accessed Madison Street would have been through a roundabout at the intersection of Christie Drive and the highway. So you would have gotten off the highway sooner, go through the roundabout, and then basically come up an extension of Madison Street at that point, and then cross through a signal at Stadium, and then continued up the hill to Madison Street.
Because getting on the highway off Christie is a disaster.
Yes.
And the fact that we don't have a wreck there every day is a miracle.
Well, they did propose widening that, right? That's
Well,
what the-
right. So that was one of the alternatives. Ultimately, they decided that was not a good idea, simply because it created, because what we have right now is an exit uninhibited off of the highway onto Madison Street. If they were to do what they were proposing, you would have had to left the highway, gone through a roundabout, gone through a traffic signal, and so there's a lot of steps. And so ultimately, as they looked at the safety data of introducing all those other stopping conditions, they decided that it didn't pan out in the end. So what they have proposed is ultimately the widening of the overpass that goes over Stadium Boulevard. So instead of having sort of an exit ramp and an entrance an entrance ramp onto the highway and then an immediate exit ramp onto Madison Street, they're proposing to widen that bridge so that just becomes a continuous weave lane from the entrance off of there at Christie, up to Madison Street. So I think that would make that lane about 780-ish feet long. So that would certainly, I believe, improve the traffic flow, but it wouldn't necessarily address your question about beautification or otherwise.
No, but I think it would help. I just know, we have hundreds of thousands of people every year driving north from the lake to and from, and it's not the prettiest thing in the world. I mean, come around the turn and next thing you know, there's Jeff City and blah. And I don't know what we need to do, or if there's architectural renderings, because that stuff's expensive, but I don't really know what I'm saying.
You mean from a streetscape standpoint, that's kind of our bailiwick, and that's what David and we were discussing this after I talked to Scott a little bit. We want to make sure we're on the right track there, but we can certainly go back and kind of mock that up a little bit. Our vision is it would probably go down towards at least to Dunklin, depends how far the money takes us and everything, but we could change that look of that and make it a little more inviting from a streetscape standpoint. Of course, then you have the properties that may or may not want to do something next to you. So,
What is the artwork on the bluff there? Is that ours or is that Capital Region?
It's Capital Regions.
Do they own that bluff?
be the state, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'd have to look
So-
to see exactly where the property lines lay. I'm not.
It's interesting.
The state or us would probably like them to buy it, but
I'm sure it's okay.
well, at one point they wanted some facing of it with a wall, which is pretty expensive. So I guess they went with the artwork instead.
So, the MoDOT, in the South Side plan, they had recommendations for that interchange, pretty significant changes, and part of it was to the looks and the functionality. Just was wondering, did MoDOT look at that and weigh in on those type of changes that were in that plan?
Say that, Mike, could you say that again? I'm sorry, I missed
In the
it.
South Side plan, they had a
Oh.
major, reorganization of that,
Right.
and it was both for functionality and for load.
I don't believe that the traffic study that they did made any reference to the South Side plan. I don't believe it did. It was really just looking at how to better handle the traffic, coming on and off the highway. The South Side plan in that area does, some of that has been done. We did, it did include a discussion of the roundabout that was built, and I think those things were almost happening simultaneously, the roundabout at Jefferson Stadium. But I don't believe that there was any particular attention paid to the plan within MoDOT's study.
And we have County Public Works Director, Eric Langler, and if you would like to share your thoughts, because this is potentially cooperative dollars working together between the city and the county, so.
I'd be happy to share my thoughts, and I guess I speak for the commission, but some of it might be my own personal thoughts, how I see things, but keeping that in mind that I do work for the county commission, and projects that are decided are joint 50-50, or they try to be at least 50-50 as much as possible as far as the funding goes. And with that, generally, communication and keeping those lines open and making sure we're making joint decisions. The Monroe Street, I think, caught us a little by surprise. I don't know that anybody was opposed to making that decision, moving on to something else. But it did caught us a little by surprise. I think generally the commission projects in the city, that needs to be at your direction and, get buy-in from the county. I don't think the county wants to make decisions on what is done in the city, but just, joint communication, making sure we're on the same page. I think they would support Madison Street.
Just for the people online.
I can move up. Thank you. Madison Street, I think, I believe the county commission would support that. Me personally, I drive that road every day to and from work. It is basically the on-ramp to Highway 54 South. It gets used a lot by people cutting through, so a lot of issues with that road. It's old. Yes, it's wide in some areas, but when there's a funeral going on at the funeral home there, it can be pretty narrow as far as getting through there. The three-way stop is odd. The entrance into Capital Region is, strange as well. Needs improvements, and even down more closer to Dunklin, it's narrow, especially when there's cars or trucks or trailers parked right there on the edge. So definitely that would be a worthy project. Just looking at the numbers, we do have the Wildwood Drive project moving forward. $3 million out of this fund was allocated towards that, but that doesn't cover the full cost. The county was kicking in extra funds there to bring that to make it happen. And those were going to come out of our major thoroughfare portion of our sales tax. So if you wanted to look at maybe putting more into that, that would be an option for you. And then the rail spur and transload facility, that project is approaching about $4.6 million. And we had city county cooperative funds, $800,000, plus we had $2.3 million in grants. Doesn't close the gap. We're pretty short. We were banking on getting some funds through the state, and that didn't come through. We did receive news last Friday that we got a $200,000 grant from USDA, so that helps, but there's still a shortfall of about $1.2 million, I think. So, you could look at putting some economic development funds into that. So I think generally speaking, the commission would support your all's decision moving forward on Madison. I'd recommend maybe just somewhat of maybe a cooperative projects working group, just an ongoing conversation, maybe one commissioner. If you have two commissioners, you have to have it as a public meeting, so just one would be better. Maybe a few councilmen, me, David, and Matt, just routinely work, maybe a couple times a year just to re-engage, make sure we're on the same page. So
Kind of like what we did with the genesis of getting Wildwood up to this.
Perfect case study and how that can happen and move things forward. And we brought that together, and we're on the same page and working together. So happy to answer any questions anybody would have from our standpoint.
No, we appreciate the county's partnership participation with the city and how we cooperatively get projects done. I just would like to caution us with, the only thing with Madison Street is just to make sure we're all on the same page as far as with the Campo, recent information of when that last presentation that was given to Campo. I'm trying to coordinate that so that we're not putting bad dollars into something that's gonna be changed with the full vision of what the state has. So I originally just envisioned shifting those dollars to Madison was to, you know, repair what we have now currently to where it's a very good, well-maintained street.
It's a busy road.
Busy road. So my personal perspective is not at this point really wanting to focus on too much enhancements until we get that clearer direction with the state of how we want to long-term impact that area. That would be my only caution with that. So, but obviously, you know, we can have further discussions on that.
This is strictly my own opinion, but at the Campo meeting, I thought they were just dumb as a post. They block off the Madison entrance to put it to the roundabout. That was just, I don't know where the guy got his thoughts about it. I would hope, I don't know, Eric, but can we keep that, will we be able to keep the Madison Street exit open from the highway like we do now? Or has the state got that much power?
I was at the Campbell meeting too, and I don't think they're gonna change that really.
Remember they discussed putting the roundabout and knocking that entrance off.
Yeah, but that was an option they weren't really pursuing. That was, sometimes
With
you,
a menu of options so that, you know, they can't say, well, you just pre-selected, you know, we're all accused of that sometimes.
sometimes you get options out there that are pretty wild and all that, and it makes the other option look really good, which is probably the one you want to go with anyway. So
Personally, I feel we can at least have the overlay and the upgrades from Madison, from the capital regions down to the highway. I mean, that would be a start. That's a bumpy road. Jefferson's just as bad. Well, there's a list of roads, but.
Well, I think staff is asking for some form of direction and for clarity here.
One of the main things is we just want to make sure, that's what David put all these on here, that there, you know, there's a lot of lists floating around and people, you know, if you jump from one to the other, you know, they may, didn't want anybody criticism to say we've left other things off the list that you didn't know about or something like that. And so that's why we wanted to give you all the list, but certainly we can go back and probably need to meet with the hospital folks and some of the people in the corridor, just to chat with them a little bit ahead of time and then kind of nail down a plan. I don't know if we have any recent traffic counts on the road yet or not. It's kind of like same thing we're doing with the folks on Stadium or by Satinwood. We wanted to count some more traffic and make sure we had our traffic numbers up to date and then talk to them a little bit more about options and go from there. So
Maybe I'm just old fashioned, but I feel that we should go back to our main roads first and then our secondary roads second. I know there's a lot of nice list projects on there, but my gosh, our main roads are in bad shape. East McCarty, West McCarty, High Street, West Main, Jefferson, Madison, the list goes on. The roundabouts by the link. I think we had the heavily traveled streets should be hit first, and then we have discretionary money we can go out. I mean, it's nice to fix a subdivision, but my golly, there's more roads. People travel the main roads than they do in the subdivision. So that's my thought.
Any other comments for a little more clarification and direction for staff on this? Is the committee comfortable with them coming back with more defined numbers with just doing the basics as far as an overlay?
You said just an overlay then?
Well, that's what I'm asking the committee.
We're not engineers, whatever's necessary. If you overlays over a
Yeah, I
broken
think,
street.
you know, if we go back to the hospital, they're gonna wanna talk about the driveway again, maybe the stop sign issue, things like that, so. Do more of a normal, you know, kind of an upgrade that we do with city county projects.
And ultimately, with just about a week ago, the federal government finally did approve PROWAG, which is the official document regarding the accessibility for sidewalks along public rights of way. And so that's been a process that's been underway for 22 years. And so they finally, on September the 7th, that became official. And so ultimately, if we are to overlay Madison Street, we would have to correct all the issues with the sidewalks as part of that project. So everyone knows.
That's great information to have, because that's what's.
Are they paying for
No.
it? So they're telling us what to do, but they're not paying for it.
Correct.
I think that's more of a suggestion.
So, and maybe relate to the city county, maybe more information about monies for Wildwood or monies for the other project with the rail. Just to see what is needed there.
I can get more finite numbers for you, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
Just so you know, and I would say from our standpoint, Wildwood Drive, with the intersection we're doing at Rock Ridge, I think we're okay just taking our major thoroughfare money or safety money and putting that into that. I'm not too concerned about that. The rail spur, I am, just with that large deficit and what the economic development that does to the whole region, actually, primarily Jefferson City, so.
How much are we talking there?
Like I said, I'll get those exact numbers. We've had some change orders. We've had some things we've had to add to the project. We're tracking about 4.6 million right now. And we had, well, now we got the grant, so we're 3.4 is really what we have. So the county's making up the difference. Right now, it's in our portion of that sales tax fund, the cooperative money. So it's sitting there. Now, at the end of the day, when we balance everything out, it could be moved from somewhere else. But right now, it's there. So I think we need to make some decisions on where that ends up.
We look forward to getting those numbers from you. All right. Item C. Mr. Seaman.
Yeah, what about B?
Oh, I'm sorry. Item B, sorry, general sidewalk policy discussion. Mr. Bangy.
Yeah, so this is kind of wrapped into the discussion we just had. The city code, basically, in Article 3, Division 2, talks about who is responsible for sidewalks. And so within that division and article, it basically says that the property owner adjacent to the street is responsible for the construction and maintenance of the sidewalk. And so ultimately, we realize that isn't universally applicable, because if it was, we would have sidewalks everywhere, but we obviously don't. So, but then in the next section of the code, there's also the ability for the council to choose to fund the repair of sidewalks. And so ultimately then those things don't really seem to jive very well with each other. The first one saying that the sole responsibility lies with the property owner, and the second sort of making this caveat that the city may become involved. And so that kind of creates a situation where there's people who are lucky enough to have the city do it and people who are unlucky in that the city doesn't. Sort of complicating that, typically when we do our city projects to either rebuild or rehabilitate a street, we typically include the reconstruction of the sidewalks with that street, and those are sort of wrapped into the project cost. So, and again, this kind of comes, Councilman Lester was discussing, sidewalks along Monroe Street, and so that's kind of what kind of sparked this discussion. And so staff is a little, which way do we go with this? And how is it that we decide, we as staff decide who is going to get a sidewalk with city money and who isn't? And so that kind of creates a situation that is not extraordinarily comfortable in that regard. And so is there a better way of doing it? Ultimately the way that that exists today in code, that has been codified that way for a long time. And so perhaps even though it's flawed, perhaps it works. But ultimately, there's issues with that. And when we did our active transportation plan and they did asked the public, what concerns do you have about sidewalks? The number one response was that they wanted the existing sidewalks to be repaired. And so how do we get that done? And again, I made mention of the fact that PRO-WAG has just passed, and so there's federal requirements associated with accessibility too. So as we look at all those things together, we just wanted to maybe start a conversation about, is there a way that we want to approach this differently? Is there a way to make that more fair? Or is there a better way of choosing how that happens? And so we just wanted to perhaps hear the council's thoughts on that, and if we want to look at changing any of the way that this works in its current state.
Any questions?
Can you give us 60,000 foot, whatever, pro-ag?
PRO-WAG. Right, so
Agriculture, but we're talking about sidewalks?
it's WAG with the W, so
Pro-ag.
the acronym is the Public Rights-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines is what, I don't know exactly how they ended up with the acronym from that title, but.
What does it say? What does it do? What's their enforcement?
Well, it comes out of the Federal Disabilities Act. And so ultimately, which was passed back in the 1970s. And so for a long time, certainly there were requirements for buildings, and access into buildings. And so since the 1990s, they've been working on these guidelines that would then be applicable for public rights of way. And so through many, many years, those things have been worked through in comments and public comment, and ultimately they have decided or established this is a final rule. Now it's been in place for a number of years as sort of an interim rule, and many of the things that we do with sidewalks are based on that sort of interim rule. It's just that it's become official now. Perhaps the biggest thing that's changed with the finalization of the rule applies to traffic signals. There's a lot of stuff that changes with traffic signals as regards to accessibility for pedestrians, regarding push buttons and tactile and voice activated, all sorts of things that go along with traffic signals to help blind people get through a traffic signal. But essentially what it does is it establishes sort of the rules for how handicap ramps are built. It establishes the offsets that you can have within a particular sidewalk before it becomes non-compliant. It deals with the cross slope. It deals with how wide the sidewalk has to be. It basically defines what those infrastructure elements have to look like in order to be ADA compliant. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah.
I think the enforcement mechanism, though, is what I understand is, you get a citizen suit, and there's people that do go about and monitor these things and sue governments over them that are.
As far as the,
I was about to say, or the Department of Justice can bring a civil rights suit directly. Fairly rare.
as far as the homeowner participation in, so for instance, and I'm just gonna use this as an example because this is one I know, but we rented a house on Camsey Lane while we built. It had a sidewalk the entire stretch, very nice. But when those homes were built, did the homeowner build that sidewalk? Are they responsible for that?
Right, so our
area in front of their house, or?
Right, so our subdivision code, which I'm not entirely sure when that code changed, but ultimately there was a period of time in the olden days where we built a lot of sidewalks, and then there was a period of time during the sort of 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s where we didn't, and then the code has changed that require that if a new subdivision is built, which Camsey is one, that sidewalks are required, and so the developer of that lot is required to construct the sidewalk in front of that property. And so, and it's a house-by-house process, and so each builder would be responsible for the sidewalk in front. And so then there's other provisions about, if it doesn't happen or if there's a vacant lot, but that's all within the subdivision code. And so those particular types of sidewalks are built with the construction of the subdivision by the house developer.
But from that point on, when the homeowner takes ownership,
Correct.
under the city code, it is then becomes their responsibility of
Right, it's,
maintenance and replacement
correct,
in the code.
correct.
Are we communicating, or do we plan to communicate that to like our local home builders association, that put it on their radar that this PROAG,
Certainly we can.
I think that it would probably be wise to get it out there sooner than later, so they're not surprised by it.
Most of our codes are consistent with what it says. The one thing that is different is that the minimum width of a sidewalk has now been established. And it is at 48 inches, so 4 feet wide, but that is the minimum. And if you only have a 4 foot wide sidewalk, then every 200 feet you have to have a wider piece of sidewalk for passing of handicapped folks. So it may well be that so our standard for anything that we do is a 5 foot sidewalk, which is what do they recommend as being the width of a sidewalk. And so we might want to look at our subdivision code and look at possibly changing that requirement to meet that recommended 5 feet width.
And again, working with our county partners as well to get that communicated out to the county-wide, I think would be beneficial. That's in case when, and hopefully we do some annexation growth, that standard's already been established, it's already been communicated. Or not.
Well, don't mind, I got
No,
a few
please
thoughts.
do.
But in the county, we don't have that kind of ordinance. So if there's a sidewalk within our right-of-way, we maintain it. We've built sidewalk on roads that didn't have it, and it's our responsibility to maintain. We don't have that ordinance. However, that ordinance is very common across the country. That's pretty much normal. It's an odd situation. Me personally, I live on McCarty Street, and when I bought my property, it's been in the family over 100 years. It's old Highway 50. It's a 2-lane road with shoulders. The city came in and built a project to widen and add sidewalk. Fantastic, I love it. But what I didn't have before, I now have 350 foot of sidewalk that technically, I guess by ordinance, would be my responsibility to maintain. Fortunately, on my side, I don't have utilities like the Schneiders did with their issues. On the other side of the road, there's utilities everywhere, all the fiber and everything, and as that work's being done, of course, those machines sit on the sidewalk and they crack it and things like that happen. So, that's a situation that, if there is a utility permit granted to do that work, they damage the sidewalk, it doesn't get detected, or it happens, or things happen over the years, it's the responsibility of the property owner to maintain it. So it's an odd situation. There's not a good answer for it. We don't have the requirement that a developer put in sidewalk out in the county. I know a lot of people like the sidewalk. I think it's fantastic, me personally, and people use that. So good comment, and maybe that's something we need to think about in the future as we develop out our, planning and subdivision regulations. Think about that, and maybe an avenue to, if they're gonna put it in, make sure it meets ADA and it's capable to be annexed in and match with what your all's requirements are. So just a few thoughts there.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that.
So just with respect to our current ordinance, in my ward, there's a lot of rental property, a lot of older property, and then there's some more well-to-do neighborhoods or areas, and the ones that are more well-to-do, they'll maintain their sidewalks. I've seen that, the replacement of sidewalks. But in a lot of my area where it's rental and lower income, they don't. You'll see sidewalks like I just gave out to you. I know in our ordinance, we have requirements about the nature of sidewalks, and it can be hazardous, but I don't think we ever enforce that. I guess I'd be interested in knowing about it. I don't think we do. And I guess with respect to project on Monroe and what I mentioned, yes, we're doing that, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna repair those sidewalks as part of that. Those sidewalks from Witten to Dunklin and Dunklin to Tanner Way, those are very seldom used, frankly. Whereas these sidewalks just beyond that, in that next half block, because there are houses on both sides, they're used all the time. So that was why I presumed that those should be part of the project, because those are really sidewalks and are very high need to be replaced. But anyway, we do have a problem because throughout the city, we have sidewalks like those. They're not sidewalks anymore. And we had, I know, we had criteria for sidewalk replacement. Some of it being by schools or on the ways to schools, which makes sense. I know across from Southwest, those sidewalks are similar to the ones I showed you, not been replaced or worked on at all. So anyway, sidewalks throughout the city are a real problem.
I definitely agree with you, yes. Which adds more strain and expense to an already strained budget. So, we're done. Councilman Schwartz.
Do we ever enforce, the pictures that Councilman Lester sent around? I know you all haven't seen them, but maybe you have.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's a residential something or another there.
Yeah, there's residents right by those sidewalks on both sides.
Do we ever enforce residents to maintain?
There's a couple of things, and I'll let Britt come.
If we become aware, by the code, if we become aware of a dangerous condition, we are required, working with the law department, to send a notice to the property owner telling them to fix the change, to remedy the problem. And where we generally become aware of it is when somebody has tripped and fall in a particular location. So we do send a letter to the property owners. What we use as a standard is a 1/2 inch offset, which I believe is in ProAg. Is that changed now, David?
You can grind a 1/2 inch offset.
Grind it,
Right.
yeah. And if it's something we can grind, we'll typically do that ourselves without notifying the property owner. We'll go out. But if it's much more than a 1/2 inch, we are required to require the property owners to fix it.
Require property owners, what if they don't? I mean,
I'll defer to law with that question.
Do we enforce it, or do we
So
suggest?
Yeah, so the enforcement mechanism is a repair and a tax bill, which is a legislative process under state law. I have never had a client that ever wanted to do that. It is politically very unpopular. Had tax bills for sidewalks to properties, particularly residential properties. So that's the enforcement mechanism. We've never done it when I'm here. I've only done it once in my entire career.
First off, let me say that it is very rare that this occurs. It's not often.
Yeah, and as to sidewalks, so while cities, and we take advantage of this, while cities do have the ability to assign responsibility for upkeep and repair of sidewalks, under state law, cities have an undelegatable duty for the ultimate responsibility for keeping repairs in good condition. We cannot assign liability for broken or out of repair sidewalks to a property owner. And so ultimately, that's kind of why our code works, because the initial responsibility is on the property owner, and we have some tools to help ensure that the property owner assists in the city in keeping sidewalks in good repair. But ultimately, the responsibility of having sidewalks in good repair is for the city, and that is not delegatable. So it's a bit of a gray hybrid mixed bag of responsibility under Missouri state law, and I think we do as well with it as any other city that I've seen. So this is a problem for every city, because the ultimate solution, doing sidewalk repairs and the tax billing, it's a hard pill to swallow for many, many city councils.
Yeah, I'll say the gold standard, if we we went through this years ago with a different council where we went out and categorized all the offsets and various things and come up with an estimate. But we found some communities as the gold standard, they had a very active repair replacement tax bill process where they basically went very systematically through a town. And then the problem is you get in that's why it says curb and gutter. You get into the sidewalk, it's up abutting the curb and gutter, then that's gone, and so it needs replaced. Then you got to cross the driveways because of the ProAg, and it just really snowballs. So a lot of very systematic where they go through and do curb, gutter, sidewalk, and drive approaches. Tax built back at probably certain levels. You see it if you go up to Kansas City and go on the Kansas side, they have a pretty robust program in some of those older areas that do this now. I think they have different state laws that also allow them to do that. Up north in Wisconsin, there's a couple towns that very systematically do this. So, but in Missouri, generally speaking, where I've worked and where I've noticed it doesn't occur. But you have to have a very robust tax bill process, I think, and willing to do that.
And I would like to just make sure I'm clear that, if there is a cause for the offset that is not, that city's responsibility, for example, a street tree. If a street tree is heaving that sidewalk, we, the city, affect that repair. If it's at a storm inlet and it's settled at the storm inlet, we as a city affect that repair. We don't require the property owner to do that because the way our staff has taken the opinion is if we're the causal, then we fix it. That's the reason it's somewhat rare. Usually, where we have had it and we've had compliance in every case that I've been involved with, honestly, it's usually a commercial entity or where it occurs is in front of a commercial entity or the state of Missouri.
Councilman Lester.
So I would be curious as to how much it would be cost to do that section from Tanner Way to East Ashley. And I would say if we do it, not even do the section from Tanner Way going up to Dunklin. Those sidewalks are, I think, in pretty good shape, and they're not used. But I wanted to talk about we have construction standards, which are good, but sometimes our replacement of sidewalks, I think they also get in the way. I think that was one of the things with two-way Monroe. Part of it was clearing the bank more and putting sidewalks on both sides. And like I said, I think on one side, no houses facing there, you didn't need a sidewalk on one side, on that one side of Monroe, and could have done the project much less expensively. I know we ran into this too when we had the sidewalks on Adams, and we eventually did one side on Adams, although it was originally for both sides, but there's large sections of Adams that there are no houses there. Put a sidewalk, be taking most of some of those properties front yard. We didn't have any yard, so there was some objection to that. So I think in some of this, when we're doing it, it needs to be done in the context and looking at functionality. It really does the sidewalk really be needed, even though we have the standards, and maybe there's opportunity for waivers within our code. Anyway.
Appreciate those comments. Mr. Bain, you had.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo a little bit what Matt had said, in looking at the pictures that Councilman Lester had given us. In some ways, looking at that appears that it would need sort of a wholesale replacement. Having each individual property owner perhaps trying to take care of that, you'd end up with a patchwork that didn't match from one to the next, and and ultimately the curb is bad. So I think so in some ways that if it's just two panels of sidewalk somewhere where the curb is pristine, that's kind of an easy fix. Looking at, those pictures, that obviously is more complicated. And so it becomes much more complex and perhaps might be impossible for a homeowner to individually address that issue because of the state that it currently is in. I just appreciate that.
Well, I don't think this body's ready to move with any kind of firm direction.
Right.
So
We're just trying to point out, I think there's a lot of
But I think what we would like, I think would be beneficial for us though, is to maybe see what other communities have done. And, what has worked for other communities, so. All right, moving to item C. Mr. Seaman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So this would address commercial drain cleaners. So in the packet, I've got a memo that states the problems we have currently with drain cleaners, including property owners being fraudulently billed for things they don't really have to pay, all the way to equipment left in the sewer mains that endanger our city employees, their safety. So we're proposing a small change to the code to give the city a tool to protect our customers and more tools for legal and other parts of the city to deal with drain cleaners.
So this is, just to tee this up, this has come up a couple times. One on, was it the
Oak Street?
Oak Street, we had a problem where, a drain cleaner came out, charged the homeowners a couple different times, is actually in the city sewer. Then finally, when he tore up the city sewer, he then finally called us and we could have fixed that quicker. So we're trying to get a little change in ordinance that we can notify these folks to say, hey, if you have a problem that's not in the lateral, you need to contact us and we'll come out and help remedy that situation. So I think that it just happened again recently on
East Miller.
Miller Street, Miller Street. And they left a sewer snake in the sewer, so precipitated clogging, things like that. And so we just want to make sure that we have the tools to say, hey, you shouldn't be in the city sewer main. You can operate in the lateral part. So that's what this is. So it's a small code change, but I think it'll help us a little bit.
You want an action item on this to where?
Yeah, we have to move it to the council to change the code.
Anybody have any questions on this? Are you comfortable moving this to the full council? But we would like to endorse that from this body.
Make the motion to push on this full council.
We'll do a roll call vote.
Deacon,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Spicer,
Aye.
Schwartz, Spencer.
Aye. Thank you. Item D, street division tandem snowplow repair update.
Yes, thank you. For the committee's information, we are starting our process of doing our inspection of our snowplow trucks as we do every year about this time. And the first trucks that we started looking at were our larger tandem axle dump trucks. We have 6 of those in our fleet. 4 we use for snowplows on a regular basis. I mean, in the wintertime, we use them for snowplows. 2 we reserve so that we can continue to do normal maintenance work through the winter without having to pull the plows and spreaders off them. Then in the summertime, all 6 are used to support the construction operation. We have, as I said, and apologize for not having a PowerPoint for this, but in the memo I outlined the age of the different vehicles. There are 2 of them that have been purchased fairly recently, both of them 2019. Side note, both of those were replaced under a supplemental appropriation because the frames had cracked on them from the previous version. Well, we have 2 more in that situation. Those are trucks number 204 and trucks number 209, which are part of our snowplow fleet. We have talked to various folks, and we believe that we can weld those frames and get some additional service life out of them. But we expect that service life is really year or two. I can't predict the future any more than anybody else can, but it is not a long time. The situation is that the frames themselves, if you will look at the frame of the truck, it's two C channels that are in the shape of a C, but they're embedded in each other. And what has happened is they're rusting between the two C channels. I'd like to talk to the person who designed that, but I don't have that ability. So these two, and then there's obviously holes that are drilled through these frames where bolts and things connect to it. And where those cracks are occurring is at that. In one situation, the crack is right where the pivot for the truck as it raises, which is the highest stress point on the frame. So we've talked to a local fabricating company, and they believe that they can weld it and we can get some additional service life. But it is a few months. We're not talking. We'd measure this in months, not multiple years. The other issue associated with this right now with supply chain issues, if we ordered a truck today, it'll take 18 months to 24 to get in. So that's about the time that I expect that this repair will last. So we will move forward with repairing at least at this point our plan is to move forward with repairing those frames so that we have them available for the coming winter, unless the committee tells us differently. And then we would like to pursue funding for those two additional dump trucks. And we expect the cost for those to be in the range of $210,000 a piece or $420,000 for the two. The only option that we have, we could eliminate the two snow plows, and that kind of gives us three options. Option one is we live with four snow plows, and we don't have them available through the winter for construction, to support construction activity. So that'll obviously slow down the construction activity. We'll have to use smaller trucks to do our hauling. Option two is we reduce our two of our routes that we use for tandems, which are our larger major routes, generally speaking. So that is an option. Or that means the tandems would have to cover more area, which would be a slower service for response to the snow. Or we'd have to handle them with a smaller truck, which, depending on the snow, may or may not be feasible. And then the third option would be a combination of the two, where 3 snowplow trucks and 1 available for the winter. We don't like either one of those 3 options. They all are reduced services to the citizenry, and so we would prefer we weld these frames up, put them back in service, monitor them closely. We are blessed with a great CM staff, although they are getting to be shorthanded. We've lost one of our mechanics recently to taking another job.
I to hear that. I appreciate you giving us a little bit of a long-term report. Snow removal is always an unknown. We might not have a need for it this year. Who knows? But the likelihood is that we will. And it impacts so many other services, our public safety. So you guys are kind of our first line of attack, if you will. We have a need for snow removal so that our police and fire can get to those emergency scenes. I think if we remember just last year, we had a sudden snow event that the weatherman sure didn't plan on. And we had a public works committee meeting that morning. And you guys did an amazing job of, because it wasn't even a planned event. I mean, generally you guys pre-plan those kind of events when
we usually get some notice.
That was not a noticeable event, and it was remarkable how quickly the snow got removed. And I hear great comments from our ward and the 3rd ward that they're just amazed how quickly the snow gets removed in Jefferson City.
We are blessed to have a great staff, and if we have a great staff with great equipment, we can be really, really stellar work. But I'll take great staff with even marginal equipment, and I can still get the job done. But it's getting to the point that we're past marginal in a lot of our equipment.
And obviously, we recognize the need to get these snowplow trucks funded this year so that they can get ordered, because we're going to be pushing these trucks to an extended extra 2 years before they're even replaced. So, is there any comments, Councilman Lester?
And I believe we do have money in this year's budget that's been collected from sales tax H could be dedicated to this, I believe.
Any other comments?
I just want to echo that you guys do an amazing job. I don't know if anybody deals with Columbia or had children living in Columbia. It's incredible the difference. I mean, they're immobilized as soon as they have to wait till the snow melts. And we really do a good job here. I mean, people wouldn't emulate Columbia, but in most ways I would wish we not. But you guys do a really good job on the streets and snow. I wish we get the street sweepers back so we can clean up the streets, but get the weeds out of there, but that's coming.
Well, they know they have a limit, and the company is committed to replacement. It's just a matter
I'm
of.
expecting a call from the president of the company today. And in fact, had a preheated conversation yesterday.
Is that still the status that they are going to fully replace that?
They are fully replacing it, but 60 to 90 days has now turned into 120 days.
Well, that could be a precursor to what we're talking about with the snow.
Right.
So all those things Britt described, we'll do internally anyway. We'll shift resources, do what we got to do to figure this out. But I think the main point was we want to notify you. We have some down equipment. A couple years back, 2019, we had a similar situation.
This
Get
body
something
recognizes the importance of this issue. Councilman Schwartz?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo what Councilman Deacon said. Columbia is a nightmare. Everybody knows it. I think option A, getting rid of the two, it's just a non-starter, which is part of the reason why I made what is potentially to some people an unpopular motion Monday in the budget committee to use some sales tax H. I think it's important that we have these things. To Councilman Spencer's point. I remember that snow event. I mean, we had kids ready to go to school at 7 in the morning before they finally canceled it. And I mean, it's just a freak thing that happened. And we got to have these vehicles. We got to have them working. What you talking about them C clamps? What happens when water/treatment gets between those?
You know, rust, and then rust takes up more space than the old steel does, which then causes expansion, and that's exactly what's happening. Those C channels no longer look like a C; they're trying to look more like an I. You know, they're trying to straighten out.
Yeah, so we have an unfixable situation. It would be my preference to have this committee make a motion to the full budget committee and council to support the movement of the $560,000 to help fund the 2 tandem trucks and also the 1-ton truck that I believe Mr. Marash said can be used for snow pushing as well.
Yeah, we have an army of those as well, where they're more focused on neighborhoods, so they're more nimble. They can get around cars, narrower streets. Yeah.
So
And again, they're year-round equipment as well.
I'm going to move to have this committee support the motion in the budget committee to use sales tax H to buy 3 of these vehicles.
I'll second that.
Motion made to endorse the recommendation of the.
Just for clarification, we're talking about to do that now within this budget year, currently 23, right?
24.
Fiscal 24, budget we're working on now.
And it's the $560,000
Yeah.
from Park. Contribution.
So I think you can do it in this budget year, I think. Is that correct or not?
I mean, if it's a sales tax H question, I don't know that we would be confined. I mean, I can confirm that for the committee and also for the budget committee tonight, but I don't know that we're confined to the FY24 budget to spend previously collected sales tax H funds. It would be nice to probably address that during this budget process, but I'm not sure that we have to do that as part of an FY24 timeline. Is that your question, Councilman?
Yes, to me, it sounds like we need to go ahead and order them because it's going to be quite a while out there. So I think it's in this budget year, and I think the money, our collections have been such, I think the monies, we have it we'll have within this budget year.
We might have to relabel and reclassify that action as a supplemental within the current budget year.
Right.
But if that's the desire, I think that we can do that. But I can certainly.
I think, yeah, we normally would do a supplemental on that, but at the state of where we're at, unless you're only saving one council meeting basically before the new budget goes into effect. So we got to get our paperwork done. It's going to take a little bit to get the paperwork done, but we really don't. Doing a supplemental doesn't help you really. I mean, you're within 2 weeks probably of having a new budget. So
Motion's been made and seconded. Roll call vote on that unless there's any further discussion. Roll call.
Deacon,
Aye.
Lester,
Aye.
Spicer,
Aye.
Schwartz,
Aye.
Spencer.
Aye. I think that's important to send this message from this body that we're taking this issue very seriously to the full body of the budget committee. So thank you for that. Item E, discuss transit system, going back to full service. Mr. Stegman.
Yes, we've recently hired 4 new drivers to replace the ones that we lost through last fall and early spring. We've got them mostly trained, so we're in good enough shape that we would like to go October 2nd, announce that we would like to go back to full service. That way it should help our service out, really help the citizens out a lot that have been suffering this last 8-9 months of the service reduction that we've had to do.
this is kind of a heads up thing. We don't need necessarily anything from you. We just want to tell you ahead of time, and then I think Jerry had a draft of a press release, news release to go out. So we're just giving you a heads up that's happening.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jerry.
Item F, High Street viaduct options. Mr. Bain.
Yes, thank you. Just kind of a little background on this. Clearly, the High Street Viaduct has been a source of discussion for a long time. It was part of a project that was named in the sales tax as something that we should be working on. And then sort of an accelerant to that was there was a hole that developed in the deck in July of last year. And then at that point in time, there was a consultant that was hired, and then ultimately by February or by November, we had that hole fixed. The bridge was closed temporarily during that time until we were able to ascertain that we could just put a steel plate. So the bridge was really only closed for a day or two, but that kind of started the ball rolling on some focused attention on that bridge. By the time when we got to March of this year, again, we talked about this under a previous topic, there was some reallocation of funding. And so the funding that had been set aside for High Street Viaduct was reduced from the $5 million down to $200,000. And so with that, there was some slacking of effort on the project. However, we had already hired Bartlett & West to take a look at that. And so they continued that work. And we have Todd Kemker with us today. So he's going to present some options that they've come up with. They had come up with several more that staff had looked at and decided that perhaps those weren't ones that we wanted to move forward with. But we have 5 different options, so we'd like to present them to the committee and then ultimately receive the committee's comments and perhaps then distribute those to a wider public audience. So with that, no questions, I'll let Todd take over.
Welcome, Todd. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me. We're always excited to work in our hometown, so excited to work on this project. Wanted to start with a quick background of how we got here. I know David mentioned it a little bit. We have done a couple of studies on this bridge to date, and those studies started back in 2011, then right after the hole was developed. And those studies were focused a lot on what is the correct path moving forward with this bridge? Should it be replaced? Should it be repaired? The conclusion of the most recent study of that was, hey, this bridge is past its life to really be repaired. It needs to be replaced. That is your best path forward. At that point, all those studies essentially assumed we were going to put the bridge back very similar length and kind of configuration that it is today. However, that's not necessarily what could happen. So this project, what we're currently looking at is more bigger picture concepts. Hey, is that the right thing to put a bridge back about the same length it is today? Should we be considering other things? So as David mentioned, I think we threw out about 10 to 12 options. I'll say some of them were kind of outlandish, kind of like you all talked about earlier with Madison Street. Sometimes you have to think outside the box, get some bigger picture stuff to help hone in on what things do we like, what don't we like. So met with the city on those big picture concepts, got down to these 5 that you'll see today. The rest of our contract is essentially to, after the city and public come up with what our preferred concept is to develop that in a little bit more detail, actually dig into it, make sure that we have all the costs that you can feel really good about, and then we can start pursuing additional funding. We know this is going to be a difficult project to pay for out of sales tax, so can we get additional funding? But we want to get to that preferred concept so that we can feel good about how much funding we're going after and be able to sell the project well. So before I get into the 5 concepts, I did want to go over very quickly some big picture thoughts that we tried to keep all these concepts, what I'll call very apples to apples, very much the same as far as some big picture thoughts. They're all very conceptual level. I'll show costs today. I will call these kind of back of the napkin. We call them per square foot costs. We haven't dug into whether or not how much concrete and steel is in the bridge, but we know about how big the bridge is, so we can get a rough cost from it. So big picture, we think these are all feasible options. We will show we will show some options that have a new intersection at High Street and Missouri Boulevard. We are showing a roundabout at this point. I want to be clear, that is not necessarily a recommendation that we're saying, hey, the roundabout is the right type of intersection for that. Essentially, again, wanted to keep it apples to apples, and the intersection could be a signal, it could be a roundabout, could be some other type of intersection, but we wanted them all to have the same cost in it so that you didn't have, hey, here's a bridge solution and an intersection solution, and here's a different bridge solution and a different intersection, and you start getting things mixing and matching. We want to focus on what's the right bridge. And then once you figure that out, we can come up with what the right intersection is. So why do we show a roundabout? Well, a roundabout is probably a little bit bigger, so it's a little bit more difficult to fit in. If we know we can fit the roundabout, we can switch it over to a signal at a later date. Zero problem. So definitely didn't want to get this focused on, hey, I like that option because it has a roundabout, or that option because it has a signal. We kept it the same on all of them. And then the other thing that's kind of, again, an apples to apples comparison is we're focused on the High Street Bridge, Weirs Creek, Railroad, Missouri Boulevard, and that bridge going over it. There's also a nearby bridge where Weirs Creek comes around and goes under Missouri Boulevard. That bridge is deteriorating. It is not, hey, we need to replace that next year, like the High Street Bridge is getting close to that, but it is deteriorating. So in some of our options, we do have that needing to be replaced just because we're messing around with grades. We made that a replacement in all the options. Again, we didn't want one of them to look higher than the other and it be because of this bridge. We wanted that to be apples to apples in all of them. So as we get into the options, they all assume this typical section. So this is what the bridge would look like in a cross-sectional view. It's very similar to what the bridge that's out there today, a 2-lane bridge, same basic width and 2 sidewalks. So that's what all these options consider. So 5 options. The first option is, again, very similar to, I'll call this the most basic option. It is going back with an option, bridge length somewhat similar to what you see today. We are planning on shortening, I call it the low end of the bridge. It's the northeast end, over near the Truman Building and St. Peter's Church. We can shorten that end of the bridge. If you think about a lot of recent bridges around town, let's say Jackson Street, Chestnut, out by 179, you put a retaining wall, an MSE wall up, and then you shorten that end of the bridge up. So essentially we can put in a retaining wall right just past Missouri Boulevard, shorten that bridge up. I believe the existing bridge is in the 860-foot area. This is a 586-foot long bridge, so we are shortening it. But in general, it would span the same thing that the existing bridge does. And again, we're showing Missouri Boulevard Bridge being replaced. All these options actually show that being replaced with a box culvert. This option does not require that bridge to be replaced, but that was where we wanted it to be an apples and apples comparison with the next options. So here's where maybe get a little more surprising and a little different options. Today, Missouri Boulevard goes under High Street. There's kind of an interesting intersection there where you have the slip ramps over kind of by the St. Peter's Truman building. That could be changed to be a full intersection. Basically, to make that happen, we would lower High Street a little bit. So essentially the bridge gets a little bit steeper, the hill gets a little bit steeper. We didn't want to go all the way down because a couple of reasons. One, that makes the bridge really steep, and two, one of the great things about High Street is when you get a big flood, hate to bring up, there could be another 93 flood. An advantage High Street had was it was out of the flood. So we used that flood elevation to say we don't want to lower that intersection below that because we want High Street to maintain that flood route. So we then bring Missouri Boulevard up some. So that's what these options show is Missouri Boulevard comes up, I want to say 6 to 7 feet. I have profiles we can look at if you want to get into that kind of detail. And then High Street comes down the rest of it. So it's kind of a meet in the middle of the two, where those two roads currently are. Again, we're showing a roundabout. That could be a different intersection. And so then that shortens the bridge. Instead of the bridge having to span Missouri Boulevard, now we can shorten the bridge and it's just on the other side of that intersection. We have to replace a whole lot more Missouri Boulevard, though, to make this happen because we have to bring up the grade. One other thing that could be a benefit to this option, this is very much an optional add-on thing that you could leave out but could be a good option is today, if you think about Missouri Boulevard and all those parking lots, you have a lot of people crossing that, especially the morning and evening rush hours of when everybody's leaving the Truman building. When we raised Missouri Boulevard up, we raised it up where we have enough room that we could put a pedestrian culvert underneath so that essentially you take all that traffic instead of having to cross Missouri Boulevard and we show them in an optional box culvert going underneath so that we, again, get all that traffic off that roadway. Okay, this option, option 3, is extremely similar to the last one. The only difference here is that we have taken the bridge and we've shortened it up even more. The only way we can make that happen, though, is we have to actually realign Weirs Creek. Weirs Creek currently crosses at a pretty big angle to the High Street. If you look, it's almost the Weirs Creek is right under High Street for a very long stretch. But what if we took and we kind of realigned it where they crossed a little more perpendicular and brought the Weirs Creek back around? So that's what this does. We were able to shorten the last option at a 410-foot long bridge. This goes down to 230 feet, but it creates that Weirs Creek realignment need. We have not talked to the Corps of Engineers. They will have questions about realigning Weirs Creek. We think we can probably do it, but we would have to coordinate with them. There might be some mitigation costs, but we've tried to include those in a cost estimate, but we have not approached them yet because we didn't want to start approaching them until we had some buy-in of, was this an option anybody actually liked? Okay, the last of what I'll call the normal bridge options is take that box. All the previous options had a box culvert under Missouri Boulevard. We could actually extend that box culvert all the way under High Street, and the High Street Bridge no longer crosses Weirs Creek. Weirs Creek goes into a box culvert, goes all the way through High Street, the parking lot, Missouri Boulevard, and pops out on the other side. That's something that could definitely be done. That allows us to shorten the bridge. We still have to have a bridge there because there's a railroad. Unfortunately, this bridge crosses the railroad, Weirs Creek, and Missouri Boulevard, so we could maybe get to where we don't have to cross Weirs Creek with the bridge, and we don't have to cross Missouri Boulevard. Unfortunately, I don't know how to get around the railroad, so we have a bridge there. That's the main change to this option. I will give you a sneak peek. This option actually came out to be more expensive than we thought it would. That box culvert gets pretty long and expensive. Our last option, before I show you the costs, we felt like we needed to show, there's been comments, questions of what if we just didn't put the bridge back? It is a big asset, a bit expensive bridge. So what happens if we don't put the bridge back? This is essentially what that could look like. You end up having a more standard intersection at the bottom. It's a 3-legged intersection. Again, we show a roundabout. That could be a signal or stop control, but essentially lower High Street there to Missouri Boulevard. We probably wouldn't be raising Missouri Boulevard here, so that box culvert underneath and stuff to get pedestrians across isn't as much of an option here. But it gets rid of the bridge. We did feel like the flood route was important. Not only is keeping High Street important because of the fire station and everything, it is also the flood route. So the way to get around that here is, if you look up at the top of the screen, we show Main Street being redone. Essentially, that is taking Main Street and raising it above the flood level and replacing that bridge. I will say there is some complications here. If you kind of picture the Mill Bottom area, the bike shop, if we are raising Main Street by 2 to 3 feet, you could imagine that gets a little bit challenging there. Some drainage and grading issues that, those are built right at grade right now. So final slide is costs. So if we start with the top option, replace existing bridge, we came up with right around 12 million. I think that is a number that actually city staff, they've projected a very similar number. Our last estimate was closer to 10 million, but inflation, they knew inflation was kind of crazy lately, so they were guessing closer to 12 million. That's what we've come up with for just putting back a similar bridge to existing. Once we start going into the options of, hey, what if we make this an intersection and shorten up the bridge and no longer have Missouri Boulevard grade separated, that we actually started lowering costs. You can see the two options there. The 410-foot long bridge was a little over 11 million, so we're saving about $1 million when we're creating that intersection. So you get an intersection and a cost savings there. And then the last one, or the next one down, is that 230-foot bridge. That's the one where we actually realign Weirs Creek. So we shorten up the bridge, get some savings there, but we have to realign Weirs Creek, so that offsets some of our savings. I already kind of told you that the actual most expensive one was when we encase all of Weirs Creek in that box culvert. That box culvert gets pretty long and expensive. And then, again, we wanted to show what removing the existing bridge isn't free. You remove it, you redo an intersection, you redo Main Street, so that actually came up to about 7 million. So happy to answer any questions you all have about this. I guess David could probably speak to it. I think next steps are, hey, are any of these options that we really want to move forward with? How do we engage the public? Those types of things.
Any questions, comments from the committee?
Yeah, I will say, one of the purposes of this is go ahead and get this out there and say, we didn't necessarily want to put you on the spot that you liked one or the other or anything. We want to go out, have like a public meeting, invite the public in, look at these options. Unless there was something big red flag to you here, we thought, having pedestrian crossings that's often talked about in that area is a good idea. It also brings in maybe the state to help us partner on this and give them a reason to do so. The intersection, having a good intersection with the bridge, it helps with the school there at St. Peter's. My kids all went to school there, and it's always a zoo there, in and out. And so that clears that up. And it's not just for the school, the public's trying to travel through there as well. Fire department's at the top of the hill, so they're always trying to get through there, the bus system, et cetera. So, but then the last one we really pushed hard on is to, hey, what if we do remove this? We got to have an apples to apples, as Todd said, to worry about flood control, because that's the number one comment you hear. And so them trying to address that as well. So I think the next step is, unless you have some want to make some comment or anything, is really we schedule a public meeting, invite the public in to look at these, maybe a series of them, more than one, who knows, and go from there and then come back, summarize that, come back to the committee and talk more about it.
Since we do have major infrastructure, and when I call major infrastructure, we have a fire station right up the road there. Chief, is there any, and I'm not to put you on the spot, but and I think you have had some good communication with the Department of Public Works, particularly with Matt and staff. Is there something that, you're not comfortable with and isn't, not necessarily a non-starter, but I mean, is there really a reason to even pursue it if it's going to impact services from?
I think they're all very workable for us. I would, at this point, I think, keep all the options open. And then at some point, if there's a desire from this committee, we could rank them from our perspective as well. Maybe come back to that as part of that public engagement process. I think that's probably the best way.
And to reference what you spoke about just recently with the state, we met with OA, and that is a major concern for them, having some pedestrian crosswalks in that area. And it is dangerous for them to navigate across the streets there. So I think engaging the state with these options, I think, is critical to hopefully get buy-in and participation.
Yeah, we'd probably have just a session with them and their staff, or with the school, invite them, big stakeholders in the area.
Any questions or comments? I think that's a very viable process to start engaging public and stakeholders.
Todd already said, but where we're heading in the county, of course, this is a city-county project.
Absolutely.
And once we can hone in on an option, then we can get them to develop that a little more, and then look for granting opportunities and things out there, partners to help us, so we can have a good set of documents for folks to look at when we apply for things like that.
Well, again, I just want to echo the urgency with this project, and thanks for our county participation as well, and look forward to having our state involvement too. Item G, review of intersection types. David?
Yeah, sir. Yeah, so this kind of all dovetails together. Last month, you might remember, we had folks that came in and were talking about the Stadium and Satinwood intersection and the grant that we were applying for there. And part of that discussion sort of became a discussion of intersections and what type of intersection might be best there. And so we just wanted to take a step maybe and just kind of go back and look at intersections and what they're trying to do and what problems they're solving. And so the memo, I ultimately want to kind of focus on roundabouts, but to get there, there are various and sundry types of intersections. And really what we're trying to do with an intersection is balance safety and efficiency is really what we're trying to do. And so in very low volume, low speed situations, you really don't need much control at all because, the likelihood of your encountering anyone at that intersection is very low. So you wouldn't want someone to stop there because there really isn't any safety issue. And so you really want to move forward with a solution that sort of addresses those two issues. And so, as speeds and volumes increase, just for the sake of safety, you have to compromise a little bit on efficiency. And so that's kind of how you move through the system with side stop control or all stop control and ultimately, perhaps a signal. But as you talk about, the possibility of a roundabout, you create kind of a separate tract for that, because a roundabout can be used in any situation where any of those other traffic or any of those intersection types could be used. It could be in a very low volume, low speed situation in a neighborhood. We have one of those up, I think, in the neighborhood where the folks here today were from. And we also have those, on Stadium Boulevard, very highly traveled routes. So really what you were looking at there is, and I'll just usually compare them to traffic signals because that's kind of usually the discussion point. But as you look at the possibility of a roundabout versus a traffic signal, the efficiency, I'll start with the safety. The safety part of it is that there are many fewer conflict points at a roundabout. I think a standard traffic signal, there's 32 points of contact that you could have with another car as you move through that intersection. And with a roundabout, that number is almost in half. And so just by its very design, it's safer because there's fewer conflict points. And the other part of that is through its design itself, it's basically slowing traffic, and any crash that you might typically have is going to be a side swipe rather than a right-angled crash or a rear-end crash, which are usually more severe and cause more injury. So from that standpoint, a roundabout is a safer intersection. In efficiency, if we compare it to a traffic signal, obviously a traffic signal has phases, and generally speaking, you're not going to approach the signal every time and be able to move right through it. You're going to get a red light, and you're going to be sitting there regardless of whether or not there's anyone in that intersection or not. Ultimately, a lot of our signals have detection, and so it will trip and it'll move through the cycle for you, but some of them aren't. Some of them are just timed signals. And so if you happen to pull up at the wrong moment, you could sit there for 30 seconds and there isn't anyone else at the intersection. And so a signal is not adaptable to variations in traffic volume, whereas a roundabout ultimately is. If you come up to a roundabout and there isn't anyone in it, you move right through it. And so, as traffic picks up, traffic gets heavier. Typically what happens is the speeds slow, take a smaller gap. And so it's actually kind of adjustable in terms of the traffic volumes that can move through it. And so there's also some savings ultimately in people's time. So that's a cost. And there's also costs for fuel consumption or otherwise. So if you're not stopping people when they wouldn't otherwise have to be stopped, you're improving both of those things. You're saving people time, you're saving fuel, et cetera. And so I think those things are all, pretty obvious. The roundabouts can also be used for strange geometry. We have strange geometry in town in various and sundry places. You might recall the intersection at Tanner Bridge and Ellis by the Knights of Columbus Hall there. That was a four-way stop intersection that we converted to a roundabout. Part of the problem with that intersection was it was quite skewed. And so it took a long time to travel through the roundabout because the length of the intersection was so long because of the skew. So we would have backups, 5 or 6 minutes it would take you to get through that signal in the evening. And we changed that to a roundabout, and because, a roundabout was able to accommodate that strange geometry, all those backups disappeared. And so, also in terms of, I think the other big thing that a roundabout provides over a traffic signal is certainly in regards to maintenance. And so with a traffic signal, certainly maintain the lights, you're also maintaining the cabinet, you're, constantly counting, or not constantly, but you're often counting the traffic to see if the traffic patterns has changed so that you change your phasing pattern or your timing in that signal. And so all those things take time. I think we also, we're talking about changing out, needing some additional money to change the cabinetry out on a couple of our signals currently. And then going back to ProWag, which we just talked about earlier today, all the additional requirements that is going to place on all our traffic signals. So as we look at making upgrades to any of our traffic signals, all of those will have to be changed to meet those new requirements. So again, a roundabout ultimately, once you have it on the ground, it doesn't really require any maintenance other than what you would typically do to a typical street. There's other issues, there's other things. Certainly if you look at a roundabout, the right-of-way requirements at the intersection are greater than if you were to use a traffic signal. But oftentimes, you kind of use the concept of a wide node, narrow road is what they say. And so ultimately, if you had a traffic signal, you would probably need wider approach lanes and departure lanes because you would need to have ability to store a large volume of traffic while the light is red and then have them move through the signal efficiently. Whereas with a roundabout, you wouldn't necessarily need that wide road because you're not stopping or platooning those cars. And then you also don't have any need for a left-hand turn lane. And so those lanes could be then otherwise occupied with through lanes. And so in some ways, while it looks like it occupies a lot of real estate at the actual intersection itself, it could well save you real estate further out from the intersection. So those are just a couple of points. So as we look at intersections, we're keeping all that in mind. And so it ultimately oftentimes start with, will a roundabout work here? Rather than just thinking that as an afterthought because of those benefits that we see that they have. And so that's kind of all I had today. Certainly would happy to answer any questions or comments that the committee might have.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
The only thing I've noticed, David, and I like the roundabouts, is that it seems like the pavement breaks up more quickly with that force is putting on going around the street, especially with heavy truck traffic. You'll notice that it starts to push away.
Right, we do. We've recently done a microsurface on the roundabout at Tanner Bridge and Ellis. And certainly you made mention, I think earlier today, of the roundabout at down by the high school at Stadium in Lafayette. Both of those roundabouts have been in place for 10-ish, 12-ish years. And so, I mean, I think ultimately, if we look at the life of an asphalt pavement, I think we're really looking at 15-ish years, generally speaking. So certainly there are additional forces that get placed on those, but generally the speeds are a little bit slower, and so some of that's mitigated by the speed. So yes, certainly, you know, that is an aspect of it. And some of our roundabouts are concrete. The ones over like on Stadium are concrete, and so we've gone back and forth in terms of what the best material for that would be. Part of that discussion is if it was a concrete panel that we had to replace in the roundabout, that would be somewhat detrimental because you have to close that off, and that doesn't really create, you know, you don't really have a way to move through that intersection if only a part of it is closed. So replacement of a concrete panel is hard. So whereas if you're just doing a milling operation, that all happens pretty quickly. So anyway, so those are some of the things that we try to balance when we look at that, but certainly it does become an issue with maintenance ultimately because it is a little harder than doing maintenance just on a straight stretch of street.
Well, I just would like to say, you know, at our last public works meeting, you know, there was the neighborhood there, Satinwood. They just want to be engaged. They just want to be part of the process, and I can't fault them for that. I think,
sure.
And I know that you all are willing to do that. So, and maybe, you know, maybe once some of these explanations are conveyed to them, maybe the comfort level might be changed. I don't know, but I think just having some honest, open engagement with them is critical. So.
And we've put together several different alternatives there, and hope as soon as we get the traffic count information back in that we can, you know, be fully informed and can have some meetings with those folks.
Right. So. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item H, Northwood Drive Sewer Extension. Mr. Bainey again.
Thank you. So let's see. I think if I go forward here a number of slides, we can see a picture of this. Oops. So Councilman Spencer had asked us to take a look at what it would take to extend a sewer line that could serve properties up along Northwood Drive. So that the area right through here. This is Rock Ridge Road, and this is the short stub of South Ridge Drive right here. The Route C Rock Ridge intersection is just off the picture here. This is the location that had been discussed for the potential Dollar General store some months ago. So, and so this picture is actually laid on its side, so north is actually to the right. But there's a sewer that exists over here to the east of 179, and it serves all the properties, Colonial Hills, et cetera, et cetera. And so, and then also when Highway 179 was built, there was a piece of sanitary sewer that was built under Highway 179, you know, sort of in anticipation of being able to bring sewer to this side of the highway at some point in time. This is actually, that's one of, I believe, 3 crossings that are made in this stretch between here and the Mission Drive access. So in order to make this work, essentially then what we would have is a short section of sanitary sewer that would need to connect from the existing sewer here, basically up to the eastern end of the sewer that was put under Highway 179. We're estimating that the cost of that particular sewer would be somewhere in the $30,000 to $40,000 range to get that in there. Again, these estimates, we don't really know where rock is or otherwise, which might change that number, but it's generally a number that we think we're comfortable with. So if that were to be the only piece that gets installed, you know, it does get you, you know, close to a couple of lots over here, but doesn't really give you, you know, much access, you know, to the, you know, to folks who would be wanting to use that sewer. So really you're looking at then an extension that would allow you to capture these 8 or 9 properties along Northwood Drive. And so, again, so that sewer, we believe, just looking at the contour information, that sewer could be built. Again, we're looking probably at a number about 160 to 170,000 to get that extension put in there. The little red lines that on the drawing, those would be lateral connections from each of the individual houses. That would be at the cost of those properties as they would like to connect to that sewer line. And then ultimately, we don't know what could potentially happen at this location, but the ridge line is right here along the road. So this property could have access to the sewer depending on how they built it, but if it was lower, certainly they could pump to get into the sewer line, so it would be available to them, but it might not be as easy as just a gravity line. Then we also showed, and we don't really have a number for this, but we also showed kind of a further extension, kind of following another ravine, going back up kind of more to the west. That section of line, were it to be installed, would capture about another 9 properties in that direction as well. So that would be about the extent of this line that kind of captures that little drainage area. And so those would be, the properties that could be served by this extension. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
This section, Northwood, South Ridge, that has been in the city since?
I am not for sure. I can look that up for you, but I don't know.
Do you happen to know, Councilman Wright, who's our guest?
2008, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I think it's 2008.
That was a voluntary annexation? Or?
That was a forced annexation.
Since it's voters.
Voter approved, yeah.
But if that sewer extension is made to those 8 property owners where the red lines tie into, is that, I thought that they would be required to tap into the sewer. It would not be an option.
I think typically we're not aggressive about requiring it, but if you have a septic system or something like that, presumably now, when that fails, you would be expected to get into the system at least.
I've been in a situation like that in Tulsa, and when it came through, I think everybody did get it, even though it was quite expensive to link up.
And obviously, just from a cost perspective, that would be the time to do it, is when we're laying the pipe. Is there a way that we could cover that cost for the residents and then they pay back annually through their sewer bill? So it's not a lump.
Ryan's over there, but I think we do that through a tax bill. Is Eric still here?
No,
yes. Oh, he's right. We have done it where they essentially pay, set up at 8% or something like that through the sewer fund.
Right, so the sewer extension policy, it's $6,000 per unit, so this project would be over that amount. But Matt's right, if you get the cost down to that, the portion that they pay would be like a 15-year 8% loan. It's something that the previous finance directors thought, they didn't want the city to be a bank. They wanted to try to get people to use private money to do stuff.
But as a last resort, you could do that. The interest rate's not very, well, it's getting more competitive now, but there for a while it wasn't competitive at all.
Well, I feel it's a critical component to any kind of growth in that area to say we've fulfilled our obligation of extending sewer services to that area, and I think we see the potential of growth in that area for future city expansion. So, Councilman Wright and I have, been really encouraging this, getting this information, and I'm kind of optimistic with that. I thought it would probably be significantly more dollars to accommodate this. So,
yeah, I think I'd sent some email traffic about it. I said, you might, anytime we do a project, there's always contingency consideration. So I said, if you have about $200,000, we don't have all the property for this, number one, and number two, we don't really know. We made some guesses on the rock excavation, but hopefully they're good guesses.
My thought is if we want future annexation, we're gonna have to fulfill our promises. I mean, this has been 10, 12, 15 years or so. We wanna annex other parts, so I can go right back to this. Well, you didn't, why annex? We don't get the service, so I think this is one promise we should keep.
I know Councilman Spicer had to leave, but I think he's fully committed to this project too. I think I would entertain that if this body would like to pursue this as a project. If there's, do you need any more information as far as?
No, I think you're
finite number.
No, I think that for now, you guys have been talking about it in budget meetings, so this is just, I guess, backup for that number to understand what our thinking was putting it together. So it's been fairly well put together, I would say. And there's other options. You can vary the location. We've done this. We had this project in the past where we tried to put it on the other side of the houses, and the code, if somebody were in an unsewered area of the city, they would normally have to pay these costs to get the main extensions. This is maybe a little more different since it's quite a barrier at the highway there, but anyway.
Do you need an action item from us?
I don't need anything. It's really the council if the council funds it, we'll go build it.
Well, again,
yeah, I mean, if you want a recommendation from your group to the full council.
Yes, like we did with the funds. Do a roll call vote, please.
What's the actual?
No, actual motion is to endorse this project as part of the budget discussions for 24.
Deegan.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Spicer. Schwartz. Spitzer.
Aye. Okay, any other old business for item 5? Okay, we'll move to neighborhood service grants. Ms. Sensi.
Thank you. The first update that we'll give is regarding the EDA grant for MSP infrastructure. And I had sent a full email out to council a couple of days ago just to give you a heads up. But we did work with EDA and determined that due to conflicting timelines and the shift in the project scope, that the city would terminate for convenience that agreement. And what terminating for convenience, what that means is that we didn't do anything wrong, so to speak, as far as the grant goes. So EDA would allow us to come back in the future and request funding, even for the MSP site if possible. To back up, the EDA grant, we started the application right before the pandemic set in. So the consequences of the pandemic and trying to get the hospitality component of the project funded and being unable to do that was one of the issues. Also with the state investing in the site with the One Health Lab, which we are encouraging, their timelines also were not meeting with the infrastructure. So after trying to work with the timelines, work with EDA, it was determined that it's just not going to work at this time and maybe get a little bit more organized and pursue in the future. So while that's not the news and the outcome that we were hoping for, it also allows the city to look at the site with a little bit of a refreshed perspective and pursue it from that point. Our CDBG entitlement funds, we are working through our program year 23. So some of the things that we have upcoming, we did meet our down payment assistance goal, so we are probably not going to be offering any more down payment assistance applications until January 1 with the new funding rolling in. We do have a couple of demolitions that we're working towards. 1320 East Miller, we're doing that as a one-to-one replacement, whereas we pay for the demolition through CDBG funds. Habitat for Humanity comes in and rebuilds a structure there. So it's kind of a partnership opportunity. We are also getting ready to start the environmental review process for the animal shelter that's off of the Fire Museum and off of the East Miller Park there. So we could remove that for utilizing next year's funds. One of the planning activities that we're currently working on is the analysis of impediments of fair housing choice. We are required by HUD to update that plan every 5 years, and we are currently in our last year, so we're working towards that. Also utilizing the same consultants that did our housing study, which is RKG. We anticipate that planning document to be done before the end of the year, so we'll do a further presentation on that once that gets into final draft status. We are also working through our consolidated planning efforts for 2024 to 2029. HUD requires us to have a 5-year plan and then annual action plans that feed into that larger overarching plan. We've done several public engagement meetings already throughout the course of this year. And the main target of those funds is everything housing, from homelessness to home ownership. Again, trying to incentivize housing where we can. CDBG CV, this is the CARES Act allotment that we received. We funded 11 childcare facilities. With that funding, all projects have been completed except for 2. One of our projects is getting ready to get its authority to use grant funds for early explorers located at 211 Oscar Drive. They're going to do a building expansion project that will allow them to be able to watch more kids. Our disaster recovery funds, also CDBG. As you well know, we did provided the letter of support to Stronghold Landing. Their MHDC LIHTC applications are due on September 23rd. So they're working through this week and next week to get those in. So we've been helping them a little bit here and there with documentation that they need. The LIHTC recipients are usually announced by MHDC in early December, sometimes late November, but it's just a balancing act between the holidays, so it's never really consistent. Last year, I believe it was December 9th, just to give you a frame of reference for when that decision will be made. Our Historic Preservation Fund grants, our Paul Brune revitalization grant, most of the properties are through their environmental review process. We have 2, 206 to 210 East High Street and 300 East High Street are currently still, 300 East High is still working through its environmental. The former J.C. Penney building is a little bit in NPS limbo due to the structure, the condition of the structure. But the rest of the projects are starting to do their procurement, meaning they're hiring their contractors, so you'll start seeing activities at some of those sites and some of those addresses. We're really excited to see the final product. Okay, and then design guidelines. This is some of our other HPF. One of them is the West Main Phase 2 Architectural Survey. We also have a consultant, H3 Studio, doing design guidelines. And what that is it's a document that helps people pursue preservation or restoration or even build new construction in the historic areas. It's kind of a how-to document. It also updates our current historic districts, including the Capitol Avenue overlay. So one of the things that they're going to come and do is they're going to present at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting on October 10th. And one of the things that they really want to work through is what Capitol Avenue overlay is going to look like. And I know that conversation has come up amongst council members before, so I wanted to make you all aware. If you want to be part of that conversation, and they're planning on bringing renderings on what infill could look like, what it would look like for assemblage. all the different options from a preservation viewpoint that could be workable for that area. So I'd really encourage participation for that. And the consultants will be in that afternoon of that day. So if that evening doesn't work, we can maybe work up something for the afternoon with them.
I think it's very important that we look at that because I think that is stifling development up there with that overlay. So this body will be engaged in those discussions for sure.
Wonderful. The state CDBG CV, this is again CARES Act, but not the ones that we received directly. We applied for this through the state of Missouri. The EMS facility, I mean, you can see it right across the street, is currently under construction. Also, our other state CDBG CV projects that we have, transformational housing, the MOU or the MOA with the State Historic Preservation Office is in the process of being executed. We've been working with the SHPO since April of last year, so this is kind of a big hurdle for us to clear, which means we basically put it out for public comment period, and then once that's been achieved, we can actually start on that project, which I know transformational housing will be very excited to start. Community Revitalization Grant Program, and that's the grant that we applied for that would do demolition of structures at MSP. And some of the rehab to button up once we demo. So that grant is still available. While we work through the options of MSP, that's something to take into consideration, the funding that's available there. Also, the local tourism asset development grant. Both of these grants were awarded within a month or two of each other, so we're still kind of in that administrative setup, getting all the reporting documents. That way we'll be able to move forward there. Our Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District grants, these are some of our smaller grants, but if we are working on one at a time, repairing and repainting the 3 glass recycling ripple bins. We did contract with Extreme Body and Paint. The Save-A-Lot bin is currently in the shop. We did notice on social media that there was some concern that we had eliminated the service. That is not the case. We did put a sign out there letting them know that it's kind of being rehabbed right now and it'll be back. So I wanted to let you all know in case you hear from constituents. We're also working with the Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District in Cole County to subsidize household hazardous waste program. The city currently budgets $19,000 with Cole County contributing $5,500. We've pretty consistently been going over budget just with the increased costs of hauling off the waste, usually about by $4,000. We're working with the Solid Waste Management District to see if they'll subsidize it. We're one of 11 or 13, I can't quite remember, services that provide that. And it helps keep some of that household hazardous waste out of our stormwater system. Some of the applications that we're currently working on, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, this is a new entitlement that we're going to receive. The initial allotment of $76,000 should be going towards a planning document that will have all those measures in place and can go after some of the larger funds that will become available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. We also have a West Main, this should be phase 3, my apologies, I made a typo. West Main phase 3 survey. It'll survey Jefferson Heights, Wolf's, Carlin Addition, and High Point Place subdivisions along West Main. We did receive notification of award from the SHPO, so we know that this one is coming. We're waiting on the formal paperwork. Upcoming opportunities, I always put up different opportunities that I hear either discussed in this body or at full council, and try to provide links if you want to take a deeper dive into the program. The Bridge Investment Program is up here. It's kind of a sweet deal for the viaduct because you can bundle bridges, you can bundle box culverts, and a small bridge is anything under 100 million. I also put up, after conversations at the budget meeting, Airport Improvement Program funding. That's out there for additional pursuit. So if you have any, and that's really the end of the report. So if you have any questions about any of our projects or future funding, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions of the committee? Councilman Lester?
Do we intend to pursue the airport improvement?
That's just like when council was talking and during the budget committee meetings, I noticed that there was desire for the airport, so there's eligible components there. As far
like the things we were talking about would fit into this or not?
Yes, generally. So whenever the FAA puts out some of their funding opportunities, they basically come up with an estimate of how much, because Jefferson City Airport compared to Kansas City, other larger airports across the country, they kind of give you a ballpark figure of what you should shoot for. And Jefferson City's is right under 10.3 million that we would be eligible for in federal funds over the next 5-year period. But there's different levels. There's applying directly to the feds, applying through the state, entitlement. There's different tier steps of that too.
And in regards to the airport, I mean, you know, from my perspective, I only knew it from the perspective of being a firefighter and going to the airport and checking on the equipment that we have out there. Now, since being on the council and realizing what an economic development tool it really, truly is, it's time that we kind of make some commitment and investment on that. So, Mr. Smith.
Just to let the staff, let the committee know, the staff is actively working with our consultant on pursuing the grants. The first one off the bat is the control tower. The next one up will be the ARF building, maintenance and ARF building with the taxiway extension. And then follow that with taxiway alpha. All of that is part of our STIP. And we have yearly allocations that come through this grant program that we use. We build up some funds until we have enough to do the project, and then we also have funds that we can request in addition to that. A lot of those are in the bill funding, et cetera. But we're blessed to have a great consultant, Javiation, that is really helping us pursue that. And we also have they're not called earmarks anymore. Community projects that our congressional delegation has also secured for us as well.
Thanks to Council Representative Blake Lutemeyer for that. It's been a big support and help in that effort. So thank you to him. Any other questions or concerns? Again, Ms. Rachel brings a lot of information to us, so throws a lot at us at one time, but I'm sure she's very responsive to follow-up questions that may arise after this discussion. So thank you very much. Any other unfinished or old new business? And I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Everybody have a good day. Thanks for spending your time here.